With all of our brackets preloaded, it's time to move towards our internal robot assemblies. All right, this is our internal crossmember assembly. You'll be making two of them, but to make one, you need our 15mm aluminum extrusion, and this is 225 millimeters long. You need two of the internal corner brackets that are already preloaded. You need two of the pillow blocks that are preloaded, as well as three additional M3 by 8mm hex cap screws. You'll need the duplicate of that for the second one, and they are identical. So we'll do this one right after, but let's get started on this one. So the first step is to preload, or take your preloaded inside corner bracket rather, and load this on to the extrusion. The ridges are here to help guide it, as well as these hex cap head screws. It can be advantageous to kind of pre-line these up to where you have two parallel flat sides lined up with those ridges, so that way when you bring it into the extrusion, they will slide in there pretty easily. But if for some reason they don't, you can always give it a little bit of wiggle, or if you can get your hand in here and slightly rotate it, you can come in and do it by hand on the outside here to line it up to get it in. Or alternatively, you can also take your tool, in this case our 5.5mm nut driver, put it on the nylock nut from the other side, and that allows you to kind of rotate it and control it a little bit to help it slide into place. Once these are slid in this case, we're going to mate it with another piece of aluminum extrusion later here. So we want to make sure that the ridges are sticking out. So the flat is flat with the aluminum, but the ridges are still sticking out. So about there or so. And it doesn't have to be perfect, and you can always come back and adjust it later. Now with this in place, we're going to very lightly snug these up. And I sometimes go back and forth just to kind of evenly snug them so as it kind of comes into place with me. But it's key not to over tighten this. A, because we can always adjust this later. B, it's plastic, but really you just need it so it won't move around on you. So in this case, we're good, and you can see that the nut in there, or rather this is the hex cap screw. The nut has pulled the hex cap screw up against these two little tabs, thus tightening this little plastic piece to the aluminum. So that's kind of how this system works. So now these are snugged up but not tight. Never want to over tighten these. With this in, we're now going to come to the other side, and we're actually going to preload three of our M3 by 8mm hex cap screws. So we're just going to line up the head, slide it on. Their position right now does not matter. And then we're going to cap off the other side with the other inside corner bracket. So the first one's a little easier to get in always, because you can always just kind of rotate it and wiggle it in. The next one you will need to line up, and again, if it's difficult, take your driver, get it on the nut from the other side, and that'll help you significantly in lining that up. Get it about flush, and then it doesn't have to be perfect. You just want to make sure it's sticking out a little bit, and you can adjust this later as well if you really want to get it down. We're just going to snug up these two nylock nuts on top. This bracket's now moving, and now these screws are captured, and you'll see what those are for later. So now we're going to take our two preloaded pillow blocks, and 90 degrees to this, we're going to put them on and make them about flush as well. The key is to kind of have a similar loading style to all the parts, so that way when everything comes together, it's all lined up. But as long as it's approximately flush, you're good. And you're just snugged up, just so this won't move around. Come into the other side and place the other one. And this one's not being as nice, so we're just going to rotate it a little bit with the tool, slide it in. When we get to the other one, we're going to take the tool again, get a little bit of a jiggle, and now we're in. So now we want to make sure they're flush to the edge. Snug these two up. And there you go. That's our internal crossmember assembly. And we're going to go and do the other one real quick as well. All right, and that's our two internal crossmember assemblies done, and they're ready to go. We're going to go ahead and preload our 2 battery holder plates. One's already preloaded, but we're going to go ahead and show this one. So we're going to preload in this hole spot here. So it's actually the 5th hole over, and it's part of this little slot system that's designed for the hook and loop fastener, but we're going to use this hole here. I like to put the hex cap screw on this side, and you'll see why later, for this one at least. It doesn't technically matter, and you can work around it, but in this case, this will be holding our battery, and we want to make sure that the battery strap's out of the way, and you'll see why later on in the build. And we're going to put one on the opposite side. We're actually going to do a full quadrant, so 5 over here, 5 over here, 5 over here, 5 over here, the same spot essentially. So this plate gets all 4 in all 4 corners. The second plate is only going to get 2. Same spot, but just 2 at the top. And you'll see how that comes together later. Additionally, we're going to go ahead and preload our Velcro strapping. You'll get it as a roll. So if you don't already have this cut, you want to take about 15 inches of it, and then just taking regular scissors, you can come in and just cut this. With our strap here though, at about that length, we're going to feed it through. I like to feed it with the fuzzy side down. So with a plate in this position, you'll notice that on this side, there's this little divot here, that little recess, and that channel or recess is where the Velcro is going to lay. And it's going to lay flat there when we go ahead and put extrusion over this later. So we're going to take our Velcro strapping, fuzzy side down for now. You can actually do it either way. We're going to send this through a little more than halfway. And then once it's about there, we're going to bring it on the other side, put it through the very last little slot, pull it through. And what you'll see is that the Velcro will lay flat in this little channel. And when the extrusion comes over it, it'll be out of the way, nice and flush. And that's why we do it this orientation. Now you can go ahead and take your battery and test if this Velcro solution works for you, or hook and loop. So we just put the hook and loop over and put it down, and it'll hold the battery just fine. So we can go ahead and take this off and put a battery aside. And we are now preloaded with our 2 battery holder plates. All right, we're going to start with our 45-degree assembly. You're going to need your battery holder plate with the 4 preloaded screws and the hook and loop fastener. You're going to need 2 of the 15 millimeter, 150 millimeter long, 45-degree cut end aluminum extrusions. So you see those 45 cuts in there. You're going to need all 4 of your preloaded brackets, your 45-degree plastic brackets, the 2 that are fully loaded as well as the 2 that are only partially loaded. We're going to start by taking one of your 45-degree cut end aluminum extrusion and your 45-degree bracket that's fully loaded. You're going to take the hex cap screw side with the ridges, and you're going to line this up into this channel. And we're going to line it up so we're installing it like this. So the 45 degrees on this side. And we're just going to load it up the first 2. And then we're going to turn it around and look at it. We're going to line it up so it's approximately about here. Now the way to 100% know this is correct is if you take an extra piece of extrusion, we can actually slide this up on this side, which if we're lucky will line up pretty easily. And it doesn't matter where this is because we're just using this as a guide. And with the 45-degree preloaded, turn it around, and you can see that we had a bit of a gap there, so we're just going to bring it flush. And there's no gap there, and we're holding these flush together, and the bracket's in place. We're going to tighten the 2, or actually we're just going to snug these up really, but we're going to snug up these 2 nylock nuts that are on the smaller piece that has the 45-degree cuts in it. And once that's snug, it won't move there. We're lined up here for the future because this is essentially how it's going to get assembled later. And we can slide this piece out, and this one's ready to go. Now, for the other piece, we're actually going to make it a mirror. So I like to put these together, take my fully loaded bracket. I'm going to be putting this one on about like this. So I'm now going to set this one down. I'm now going to take this over and go ahead and slide this up. And There we go, that's good. Bring it back out a bit. Take our guide piece, have this one go in, and it might help to just line these up a little bit more. And I'm going to take my tool here to help guide the nuts in there a little bit better. There we go. So we slide that guide piece up, bring our other 45 cut piece in, pinch and hold them together, and then we snug up the two nylocks on this side. That bracket's not moving. We can now slide the guide piece out, and we now have our two mirrored pairs. Additionally, we're going to take our partially loaded sides, and we need this to be facing inside. So not this one, we're going to take this one. So they're going to be facing towards each other. And we're just going to slide this in. And for this one, we're just going to kind of very loosely tighten these down. Really, you're not snugging it even. You just want it to be there to stay in place, but you want to be able to move it. And you'll see why later. We just don't want it to be able to move too much and slide off too easily. So we have that one, and we're going to take this one, this mirrored one, and load this one in here. And same thing, just very loosely snug these up. So you can still move it around, but it's not going to fall off too easily. And once we have these, our two mirrored pieces, we're going to take our battery bracket, our battery holder plate here. With the hex cap screws on this side, we're going to preload these in. The first one's pretty easy usually, and as we come to the hook and loop, you can make sure you push it down into the channel and slide it over. And when you reach the second one, you can kind of guide it and line it up and get it in there. And then we're going to bring it down to about there. And again, this can be adjusted later, and it's not super specific. We are going to try to make them a little even, but other than that, we can always come in and adjust it later when we do a final tighten on everything. So again, we're going to go to load this one. We got a little lucky there, doing that from the back side, making sure that this goes over the hook and loop fastener, comes to the next one. I'm using my hand to kind of rotate it and position it. And sometimes just wiggling a little bit is all you need. We're going to get it to be about even with this one. Oh, my bracket's trying to skate away from me a little bit. Get it about even, and just snug these up very lightly, just so it doesn't want to move around too much on you for now. That's good, and there you have our completed 45-degree assembly. We're going to get started with our internal frame assembly. You're going to need your just assembled 45-degree assembly. You're going to need your two internal cross braces. You need 4 15mm aluminum extrusions in the 225mm length. The other battery holder plate that we have just the 2 preloaded screws on, as well as 2 more inside corner brackets. We're going to start with 2 of these aluminum extrusions, and we're just going to put the corner brackets at the end, flush with the end. So I just need to load these in here. I'm going to take my tool and help load this. So just rotate that in. And again, we're going flush, but such that the ridges are sticking a little proud. And just snug these up. Always adjust this later. You can always come back in and tighten things up. All right, we're going to do the same thing to the other one. Using the tool to help line it up and get it in. And the second one went in nice and easy. And just snug this up. That's not going anywhere, that's great. And now we're going to take our other battery holder bracket, and we're going to slide these up. And we're going to leave it about there. And we're just going to very lightly snug this up. So it can still move around, but it's not sliding all over the place. And we'll do the same for this one. And make them about even, but again, you can adjust it later. And you'll definitely see why these like to move around on us a little bit. We're now going to take our 2 internal cross supports here that we already made. We're going to take note of where these loose screws are, as well as the pillow blocks. The pillow blocks will be facing down and the screws will be facing out. And we're going to take this section and go ahead and load it onto one of these arms. Now you can technically take either one, but you want to make sure that the loose screws are facing out. And I'm going to go ahead and take my tool on the other side to help line this nut up. And that should be all we need. And then we're going to bring it until these two aluminum pieces are flush with each other. Just about there. And we're going to snug these two up. And once these two nylock nuts are snug, this isn't moving, that's good. You see this is slid around a little bit, but that's okay. That will help us later on with getting into more of the assembly. So again, we have our loose screws on this side. They're going to be facing out. And we also need our bearing blocks facing down. So that means this is the orientation we're going to put it in. We can kind of make sure that these are loaded in correctly. I'm actually going to take my tool from the other side just to help me a little bit here. And line up the other one. There we go. Make sure the aluminum pieces are about flush with each other. And tighten these two nylock nuts till they're snug. And once they're snug, this isn't moving around and we're good. Okay, so we now have this part. We're now going to take our 45-degree assembly, and the ones that are fully preloaded are going to basically come down here. So I like to start one side a little bit, go to the first one, come to the other side, load it, go back, and this one's not quite in there, so I'm going to use the tool to line it up. And sometimes just kind of working it back and forth a little bit, and we're just trying to get these lined up in here. So I'm going to take my tool and rotate this one a little bit, push it out, rotate it, bring it back down. There we go. And this last one's not quite lining up on this side. There we go. Line up this last one on this side. And there we are. So now as this comes down, these brackets are now going to be the important part. Now we originally made these pretty loose so they can move. If they're not moving on you, you can just loosen these up a little bit more. That's a little too loose, but it's okay. We can slide this right back up. Totally fine, because what we're doing now is these three loose guys are going to end up going into this bracket on this side. That's why we kind of left it loose and why we just kind of have these preloaded to kind of guide us. So I'm going to bring these screws approximately where I think they're going to need to be, just kind of spaced out with these holes. And as this comes down, we're going to try and line all this up. So you see here, we're trying to line this up. So now when the bracket comes down and the two, both this 45-degree aluminum cut piece as well as this straight aluminum piece here, they're going to touch each other and be flush, but we need the screws in this to line up. So we're going to bring the plate down to where we think we need it to be, and the screws aren't quite lined up. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take my open-ended wrench, slide it in here, and just kind of use it to guide the screws to where they need to be. And then also this can also kind of flex. So you can kind of still flex this because it's not really mounted too rigidly. So you can kind of flex it and move it. And we're just trying to line these screws up. And that's all we need to do. And once they're in there, we're going to pinch and hold this. And then we're going to come to our nylock nuts, and we're just going to put nylock nuts on each of these three little studs sticking out now. And this one's not cooperating too well, but we're essentially bringing this nut over. Whoop. and just getting it initially in there. Grabbing another little nut. Just getting it started. And once it's started, we can take our tool and get it in there a little more so they're not falling off. And now we bring this assembly together. So I'm actually pinching kind of on top of this battery plate, which is part of this 45-degree cut end, and making sure that that 45-degree cut end is flush with the straight piece here. So you can see there's no gap there. We're kind of pinching and holding this together. So as we pinch and hold these two together, we can then snug all of these nylock nuts up. And again, if we need to adjust anything later, it's good not to over tighten anything. So now that it's gotten a lot more rigid, we can also tighten up the three up here. So with this side done, we're going to go to the other side and do the same thing. This bracket is still loose, and if it's not, you can take your tool and loosen these up if you need to a little more, so it can slide around real easy on you. We're going to flex this down a little bit and bring our 3 screws over, and we're going to take our open-ended wrench and use that to kind of help position them, especially as the bracket now push it over where it's going to be. Try our best to line these up. And as I kind of bring the bracket down, we want to make sure that these are getting lined up. And a little bit of wiggle. And I'm just going to get an eye shot here to help me out. And there we go. So now we can pinch and hold this bracket to the aluminum extrusion, grab 3 nylock nuts, and start them on the base of the studs that are sticking out now from those hex cap screws that are encapsulated. Once I get it started, I can then take the driver to them, get them started a little easier. And I don't want to tighten them quite yet. I'm just making sure that they are started and they are positively on there. So now, do the same thing I did before and essentially pinch this section and make sure that the 2 aluminum extrusions are touching each other. So that's pinched and good. We're going to be able to start tightening these down until they're snug. They just need to be snug so this doesn't want to move around. And once those are good, we're going to remember to come back up here and get these 3. And these are already tight, so these are all snugged up, good to go. That's not going anywhere. Now we're going to take our last 2 aluminum extrusion pieces and we're going to actually put them on the front and back. And that's going to significantly strengthen this and tie everything together. So we're going to line up the first one a little bit by hand, slide it on there, and the next one we're going to start using our tool to help us. And it can't help to look at it. There we go. And it's going to come across, and we're going to meet into the other side. Use our tool, back it off, and use the tool to help line it up. And then go across. Now we're going to do our best as we slide this on to make sure that these sides are about even and that these are about 90 degrees. And it doesn't have to be perfect because we can always adjust it later, but that looks okay for now. So we're just going to snug these internal nylocks up. And you can measure this if you want to. Make sure these are very even, as well as you can check and see if these aren't flush. You can loosen these ones to allow the assembly to kind of come together a little better. But that's okay for now on ours. So we're going to take this one for the back side and do the same thing. Okay, and as we go to the other side, I'm going to see if I can get, I'm going to take the tool, come to this inside bracket in here, and as it's coming up, I can back it off a little bit, rotate, get it on, back it off a little bit, rotate, slide it on. And then once it's started, we can bring it so it's about even again. So these two sides are approximately even with each other. These look like they're about 90s, and it looks about lined up with the other side. And again, you can always adjust this later. So we're just going to snug these up so it won't move around on us. And this is going to kind of lock this whole system together. And now this guy's pretty rigid, and that is the completion of the internal frame.